Yeah, welcome to today's Talks at Google event. We're here to welcome Neil Gibson. He's founder and editor-in-chief of the British comic book publisher TPub. He writes several of their titles, including but not limited to the Twisted Dark series and several other series with T. He speaks to businesses and students about how they can use comic books to their advantage, and today he's here to talk about how comics can help you improve your memory and your career. So please welcome Neil Gibson.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a quick show of hands? Who here actually reads comics? Almost everyone. Great. Oh, well, not you, kind of. Been a while. I'm going to come on to that in a minute. Fantastic. Good. Okay, well, welcome to talk. Thanks for being here, first of all. This talk is about how comics can help your memory and your career. And I genuinely believe that whether you're studying or working, comics really can help you. And my objective with this talk is to give you tools afterwards so that you actually use and start using comics, either to help your memory or to help your career. And I'll explain why afterwards. Okay, so the agenda is, first of all, it's the public perception of comics, because it's like you're unusual in that most of you actually read comics. Most people I speak to don't. But a lot of people think comics and they immediately think superheroes or they think kid stuff. And it's unfortunate, but that is the public perception. I want to go into why that's the case. Because if you're going to use comics, especially in a work environment, you need to be able to counter the public perception. Next, I'm going to have to give you examples of the advantages comics have over other mediums. As all mediums have advantages. For example, music or radio, you can multitask, you can do something else at the same time you're listening. You can't do that with a film because your attention can't be split like that. And comics have a definite advantage over the other mediums. Then I'll tell you exactly how comics can help you and give examples. And then we'll do a live demonstration how you can make your own comics, because I can't draw. So don't worry if you can't draw, that's not a problem. I'll show you how you can get around that. And finally, there's questions and free comics at the end if you want them. So first of all, a little bit about me. My name is Neil Gibson. That's Neil Gibson, not Mel Gibson. Right? That's me. That's not me. Okay? Please don't confuse us. Because whenever I go to countries where English isn't the first language, I often get confused with Mel Gibson. And people think it's the first time they've heard it. I think it's hilarious. I don't. Okay, so how I got into comics? Well, I got into reading them quite late. I read them as a kid, but it was a while. I grew up. I stopped reading them because I felt I grew up. But I got back into comics because of this. Can anyone tell me who that is? What was that? Wolverine? Absolutely, yeah. I just finished university and was backpacking, and I was in Vancouver at the time, and the film X-Men had just come out. And I had a friend of mine, and we used to joke that he wanted to be Wolverine, so I thought I'd buy that as a joke present. I went into the shop, and at that time, this is back in 2000, all the top writers of comics were British. You had Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Garth Ennis, Warren Ellis, Grant Morrison. And when I got talking to the guys in the shop, and they assumed I personally knew these people. And I had to point out I hadn't even heard of them. And I got a sort of blank look, and they said, "But you've read Watchmen, right?" I said, "No." I said, "Stay here." And this girl went to the back of the shop, and I'll never forget the way she did this. She came back and with such intensity said, "Buy this." And I did. And I remember feeling silly as I walked out the shop. I thought I spent $30 on something I don't really want. But I read it, and it changed my life, really. I became a massive fan of comics for the next 12 years. I read loads of them. And the reason it changed my life is I didn't realize how intelligent comics could be. I assumed it was all just people punching each other or the Beano, like kid stuff. So why did it affect me so much? I had preconceptions. And a lot of people do about comics who don't read them. So, let's talk about the first point, public perception of comics. And first of all, the difference between medium and content. So who here used to listen to music as a kid? See, you guys are awesome. Like normally I do this talk and no one raises their hand, so I make a joke saying you're all liars or something. But you guys are actually very interactive. I even have bribes here. I throw sweets at people when I answer the first hand that goes up. You guys just all raise them. So you don't get sweets. So the answer is like everyone listened to music as a kid. And I'm not saying I own that. I'm not saying I owned that. I did. But your tastes change as you get older, and normally the content you consume will change. It's the same with TV. Like, I watched Sesame Street as a kid. I don't anymore. Your tastes change. But the medium's still the same. You still consume the same medium. But for comics, when people read it as a kid, and especially in this country, it's the Beano, and a lot of them just stop. But they don't need to, because the content is out there for people, but most people just don't find it because they assume it is just a limited palette. A lot of people I recommend Sandman to, for example. Why do they stop? Well, a lot of it is public pressure as well. Remember when I first told a friend of mine reading a manga comic called Lone Wolf and Cub. I was waiting for her in a restaurant, and she said, "Neil, you can't read comics forever, can you?" And it was a little bit offensive to me that because she just genuinely looked down on them. And so, why is it that people do look down on them? Well, I apologize to any Rob Liefeld fans out there, but I don't blame people for it if the available content is awful. If you're new to comics, you go into a shop, or you're trying to graduate from the Beano, and this is what you discover in the shop. Well, I'm sorry, that's just silly. I mean, look at the proportions here. No human looks like that. It's overly muscly, the anatomy is completely wrong. And however bad male characters are portrayed in comics, female characters are usually worse. I mean, that is a human spine. It's at right angles. It's ridiculous. So if that's what people, if that's all they see when they first go into a comic shop, I don't blame them for not trying more. Another reason is historically it was humorous. Comics were called comics because they were comical. Another word for them is the funny pages. And my book there, that psychological thriller, Twisted Dark, I gave it to my uncle, and he read a bit of it and said, "Neil, is this supposed to make me laugh?" Like, no, it's not. But people just assume that comics should be funny. Another reason to look down upon is poor logic. So if someone says, all crows are black, fine. Oh, this bird is black, therefore it must be a crow. That's not really good logic, but people do apply it to comics. All children's books tend to have pictures, because that's how they learn what the world is like, what a castle looks like, what a rocket looks like. So all children's books have pictures. Oh, this book has pictures, therefore it must be a children's book. Now, you guys are all Google employees, you're super smart, so you'd never make that kind of mistake. But a lot of people do. But I think the main reason in the English-speaking language that it's looked down upon is because of this guy, Frederick Worthen. Does anyone here know who this is? No. He wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent, in which he wrote that comic books are dangerous to children. And he proved that children reading comics were more likely to be antisocial, more likely to go to drink alcohol, to take drugs, and to commit crime. He was so powerful that Congress launched an inquiry into comics. Across schools in America, they burnt comic books. It's true. And what Congress did was they launched the comic book code, which meant that comic books could not be marketed or have adult or mature themes, had to be limited to people 13 or younger. So it made the material puerile. So unlike content in France or Japan, where it can have whatever you want, until fairly recently, it had to be limited age-wise. And when he died, in his book, he went on to say that I think Hitler was a beginner compared to the comic book industry. That's an incredible statement to make. That shows you how anti the comics he was. And when he died, it was proved that he fabricated everything, made it all up. But we're still feeling the effects today. The good news is that perceptions do change. Does anyone know who this guy is? No? Okay, well, this is Jacques Lalande. You see those handcuffs there? He swam a mile upriver, towing 70 rowboats behind his back, a mile with 70 rowboats, the last one full of passengers. And he did it with his hands handcuffed behind his back. And he did it when he was 70 years old. One rowboat per year of his life. And the reason I mention all this is because he was the guy who invented weights machines. Gyms as they existed, they wouldn't exist without him. He was a hero of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And when he first started saying that you should lift out with weights and use these machines, doctors at the time said, working out with weights will give people heart attacks and they will lose their sex drive. They were vehemently opposed to him. But obviously today things have changed, now an essential part of any athletic training. Another perception that's changed is smoking is good for you. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. And that is a young Ronald Reagan, the future president of America, advertising cigarettes. Now, you wouldn't have happened today. Another thing that's changed, women have smaller brains, they aren't as intelligent as men. This was a real reason why women weren't given the vote. A real reason quoted. Now, it is true that physically women do have smaller brains, but intelligence is made of grey matter. Women have a higher percentage of that, so it works out the same. And finally this, no black man will ever be considered for president. This was said by the Reverend Jeremiah Wright 3 years before Barack Obama was elected. And what I find amazing is that this reverend was his own reverend. Anyway, the good news is that perceptions do change, and the perceptions of comics will change, and with your help will happen sooner. That's the perception of comics, but what advantage do they have over other mediums? Well, let's start with pacing. For me, comics sit kind of in between books and film. The best communication you ever get, I think, in my experience, is when you're with someone you're in complete rapport with. You finish each other's sentences, the way they speak, their cadence, their intonation, the way they move, it's just completely in sync and you understand what they're saying 100%. But that's very rare, and you tend to be very similar to that person to be able to get that kind of rapport. So you don't have that mass appeal, but with books, an advantage of books is you decide the pace. You can go as fast or as slow as you like. You can skip passages if you want, you can skim read, or you can pore over what the meanings of these actual words are. With films, the director decides the pace. You don't get a choice in the matter. And that lends you into trouble sometimes because, for myself, for example, I sometimes speak too quickly for people. What's worse is people who speak too slowly. That just drives me mad. You don't get a choice when it gets to with films. It's given to you at the speed the director chooses. And sometimes it's too much, sometimes it's too slow. Comics, to me, is wonderfully in the middle because, again, like books, you decide the pace, but you can be guided by the pictures. And it's very efficient because a picture has 1,000 words. They can reduce the amount of text on the page or the size of the panels or the detail in the panels so to guide you through it. With books, you create the entire characters, surroundings in the world. If you want to lose yourself for a couple of hours, a great way to do that is to play video games, to program, or to read a book. With a film, you see and hear all the characters, but are limited by the direction. And again, with comics, you get to see the body language of someone, like what someone's feeling in their body, in how they move and how they. But the transition between the panels and how the characters sound, what they really like, is again in your head. All of these, your interpretation can be very personal, because they're all great mediums. But another way of saying this is that no medium is superior to the other. They all have their own advantages and disadvantages. So, for me, one of the main advantages of comics is the pacing. Next is ease of vision. I've got a question for you guys. And the first right question gets a packet of sweets. So, what percentage of neurons in the brain cortex do you think is devoted to hearing?
20%.
20%? Anyone else? 10? One more? 5? We're getting closer. It's only 3%. What about touch?
5%.
5%?
1%.
1%? No, it's 8%. What about vision?
30%.
There you go. Well done. It is 30%. That's 10 times as many as hearing. Okay? Vision dominates the other senses. Even your retina itself is an outcrop of the brain. Okay? It's the only part of the brain that's not inside the cortex. So what? Why does that matter? Well, vision is so easy. It's so quick to understand things. I'm going to show you now 4 pictures, and in a fraction of a second, you're going to get 2 or 3 meanings from each picture without any effort. You ready? Right, done. Instantly, all of you saw that this is a toothbrush holder, that's a cloud, that's a bag, that's a sink. You also saw that's a smiley face on these 3, maybe that's a shocked one, and that's a human body. And if you want a bit more detail, this is like joyous, this one looks almost smug, and that one looks shocked. And that is not a euphoric movement of that character, as it were, because it's like it's stressed, it's under tension, something's going on there. You can get those meanings from it so quickly without any effort. And that's what I love about how easy comics are, your understanding. You can instantly make sense of pictures. And to give you another example of this, I'm going to show you just this panel here. Special bonus points if anyone can tell me what comic this is from. But can someone tell me what is going on in this panel? What do they see happening? Fantastic, yeah. Perhaps that's a padded room over there. Okay? Wherever they are, you can tell it's been there a while. There's cracks in the wall. It's not a new location. To me, perhaps this is a security guard by this cable here. What's interesting to me is that this, I don't know if this is male or female, it's androgynous and hairless, it's distinctive. To have the strength to break someone's neck like that is extraordinary, but it's not very muscly. It's something unusual there. This person seems totally uninterested in this as well. There's no emotion on the face. And even these 3 lines here implies that this person's distracted elsewhere. The girl is almost an afterthought to this character, like even her dialogue is cut off. And the artist has changed the angle of the panel to make it look more intense. This is all stuff, I don't even know what's actually happening in there. This is just what you can pick up from the picture. And the reason I mention all this is because the picture has 1,000 words. Communication through pictures are incredibly efficient if you choose the time to look at it, because you can spend as much time on this as you want. You can just look at it and go, oh, let's kill someone, and you move on to the next panel. It's your choice. Another advantage, though, apart from the ease of vision, is memory retention, and this is where it gets very interesting to me. Have you ever, been reading a book and you put it down for a day or two, and you come back and you've lost your page in the book, and you wonder, where am I in this? And you flick through and you have to, have I read this before, this bit or not? Yeah, some people, yeah. What's more common, you're actually reading a page of text and suddenly you realize, oh, I haven't taken any of this in. And you have to go back and reread it. Yeah, everyone's experienced that, right? With comics, both of these happen a lot less frequency. First of all, for the picture, it's because visual recall is so much higher for images than it is for text. And they've done studies on babies and monkeys, babies with images of people. And if they keep showing new people, new faces, and it can be the same with lemurs as well. Humans can't really distinguish between different lemurs, even humans who've worked with them their entire lives. But so a baby with their way their brain works, if it's a different image, a different picture, they'll hold their attention. You show the same one twice, and they'll look away, they've lost interest. Whereas with monkeys, they've done experiments with the lever, and they'll show photographs. If they've seen the photograph before and they mark it as seen, they get a banana pellet. If they haven't seen it before, they mark the other way. And monkeys show incredible memory retention for visual images. They can show them a picture once, 3 months ago, and they'll remember they've seen it. As for not taking in a page, again, your comprehension is usually much higher with comics than it is with just text. You don't normally go back and say, oh, I haven't taken this in, because you understand from the pictures what's happening. Now, I do say usually here, because just like there are some awful books, there's some awful TV, there's some awful music out there, there are some awful comics, right? I do love the medium, but doesn't mean I love all the content. Now, combining the recall aspect of this, that you can remember it, and the comprehension gives you an advantage. And in neurology, this is called the pictorial superiority effect. And Alex Landry has done some extensive research on this. If you present information orally, like if I gave you this talk without any of these pictures, just hearing it as opposed to seeing it, 72 hours after you hear something, typically recall is, according to Alex Landry, 10% if you just hear it. Whereas if you add pictures, recall soars to 65%. Now that to me is extraordinary. Over 6 times as effective recall when you add pictures to what you're saying. We are hardwired to find visualization more compelling than a spreadsheet. So look at this data here, and please tell me which product or region is different. Region 3, absolutely. Showing this, here you can clearly see that these have all gone up, but T has gone down, whereas if you do it this graphically, red's gone up, the other two are trending down. Now, it shouldn't be news to you that understanding this is easier than this, right? Now, there's science behind that, why it's the case, but that's intuitive. What's interesting is that if you're trying to make a point in a presentation, not only is this easier to understand, but people will remember it more afterwards. And that's why you're giving the talk in the first place, because you want it to make a difference. So, how can comics actually help you? Now I've gone through explaining the advantages of the medium. Well, I used to work as a management consultant, and I was on a project in Oman once. And this company was building roads and bridges, and they had a problem because they had a production department and a maintenance department. And the production department, their job was to build as fast as possible. They had deadlines to meet. Whereas the maintenance department's job was to keep the equipment maintained properly and avoid downtime. But they're experiencing huge levels of downtime because the production guys wouldn't release the equipment for maintenance because they wanted to meet their targets, which resulted in when it did fail, failing catastrophically and having to do expensive rebuilds and have expensive hiring for emergency equipment. So their cheap solution was to use a comic. It's time for preventive maintenance on the equipment. No time, we have to work. It'll just take 3 hours. Nope, sorry. At least let us grease it. No time. And of course it breaks. How much time to repair it? Oh, not long, just 3 weeks. Now, this is very simple, this comic. But what they did was they took this and they blew it up and they put it in all the regional offices. And they put small versions of this and stuck this inside each machine, inside each crane, inside each truck, inside each bulldozer. So whenever someone didn't want to release it for equipment, the maintenance guys would go and just point to the picture. And a lot of these guys didn't speak or read English, but they knew what the comic was. And this resulted in a big reduction in their downtime. My question to you is why? Why did this work? It's because it was easy to understand. There was no effort required for these people, and it was there right in front of them the whole time. Or it can be more professional. This was a comic we made for a company called Komodo. They were the first company to guarantee against virus infection. So if your company got viruses on your computers, they'd give you like £100,000 or something. And their problem was that IT departments of their customers wanted to buy it, but the management wouldn't sign off. So we made this comic telling a story of a virus infecting a company and escalating, and eventually everyone just going nuts because they couldn't do any work, and trying to guilt management to realizing that it was their fault because they didn't take the preventive measures. And what we did here was we also put, this was the sales guy at conventions, he'd give this leaflets out to all these IT guys who didn't just give this to their management guys, but they'd remember who they spoke to. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've been to many networking events and you get so many business cards and you look at like a month later, you go, who is this person? You don't remember. You actually see what the guy looks like. You remember it. So compared to the other competitors, who are they more likely to go for? Someone they know and recognize. We also made one for an oil company. They had a warehouse system they were implementing worldwide. And so we taught people about the system, how it worked, and made it funny with the president and vice president looking like the people and had them arguing with each other. And yes, the recall and retention was why we did it, but why they liked it so much was not what we expected. It's because they tried several new initiatives in the past, and no one would read them. Everyone's so busy, they get so much, think, I can get to that later, it's not for me. With that warehouse comic, it was funny. Even people who had nothing to do with the warehouse had read it, because it was different and fun. Okay, Neil, calm down. I get how comics can be effective at work. What about study? What about for memory? Well, in Japan, they teach GCSE level physics using comic books, even up to engineering. In India, in Bangalore, there's a medical school which is teaching medicine through comics. Even some of our comics, Twisted Dark, is used in schools in the US, UK, and Canada to teach about social issues. The University of Chicago even uses one of the stories to teach about modern-day slavery. And they do it because it's more compelling as a story, and it's different. It shakes people up as opposed to the normal dry textbooks. If you ever get confused, just once, draw a picture. That's the red sun setting with the blue sea in front of you. None of you will ever get this wrong the rest of your lives. Now you've seen this. If you think about redshift, blue shift, you'll remember the sun sitting on the sea. I guarantee you'll never get that wrong. And you can do this in groups with people. We did this at school. Actually, someone else did something different. They took a fire truck and the firemen had it firing the blue water towards them. Whatever comes to your mind first. But drawing these pictures is when you have a physics problem, you're always taught to draw a diagram to help you visualize it and remember it. So this is a very effective tool for exams to remember things. Okay, get it, Neil? But I need to convince others. Okay? Well, first of all, if you're going to use this stuff, comics are fun. Okay? They're not intimidating. It's not like seeing a big block of text. It's, they're friendly. Memory retention is higher. They're quick to read. You can learn more faster. And they're more likely to be shared and passed around. So let's park those points for a minute. And I'll go into Kilpatrick's model of sequential learning. And this model, I like to go backwards. As I said before, whenever you teach anyone anything, you want results. You want to make a difference what you're taught. It's only going to make a difference if they use what you taught them. They're only going to use what you taught them if they've learnt it. And they're much more likely to learn it if they liked it or saw a use for it. So did they like it? Well, comics are fun and they're not intimidating. Did they learn it? Well, memory retention is higher and they're quick to read. You can learn more faster. You can read the thing faster. And did they use it? They're more likely to be shared with others. And when lots of people do something, the culture changes. And here's some more ammunition. This was just last month. Psychologists at Sheffield Hallam University investigated how well students learn something. And they went through 3 different methods. It was comics, the traditional text, and text with incongruous images. And I think it was for neurology. It was a standard coursework, but they just put it in this format. And this was the comic they actually used. And what they found was comics by far were the best method for teaching, for people to remember the core concepts. And they did multiple choice questions afterwards. But what's interesting is that text with the wrong images came last. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have, it's not just, it's showing, not telling, but showing the right thing so it makes sense with the text. And the actual quote they said was, combining relevant images and text creates the maximum memorability for educational material. This is edutainment. They're even being used in South Africa for people who can't read as legal documents. Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay. This is a fruit picking company. And you have a 3-week trial period, picking fruit. This is the amount you need to pick. If you don't make it, sorry, you're sad, you go home. If you make it, the trial's over, welcome to the team. Sign there. Legal document. Examples of professional use. NASA uses it to explain about ionosphere. Yahoo mapped out the interface engineering using comic books. Kilmer Investment Company taught about options using comic books. Even you guys, Google, launched the Chrome using Scott McCloud's comic. I read that entire comic because it was a comic book, all about Chrome. User manuals, I don't normally read them. I normally just go and play with them. But I read that one. But this one is the biggest one for me. The 9/11 Commission. They made a comic book about the findings. Why? Because no one read the original one. It was so big and so dry and dull, no one read it. So 2 graphic novelists went and made it in the graphic format, and then half of Congress read it. Now, it's all about the result you want. And because they read it, they're more likely to remember what they actually read. Great. So now, hopefully I've convinced you that there is merit in this, but how do you make your own comics? Because when I draw, there's not much difference between 7-year-old me drawing and my age now drawing. So, you don't need to be able to draw. I mean, you can even, like XKCD or something, have stickmen drawing things. You can do things that way. But if you want to make it look nicer, there's a free app called Prisma, which you can download on your phone. And I checked this morning, Comic Life is another app you might need, which costs just $4.99. So all you do is you take photographs of a scene on your phone, plug it into Prisma, the photos, and select a filter you want to use. It will take a couple of seconds to process it, and then it changes into a comic book font, a comic book feel to it. To show you some examples, I tried a few of them, and I did this just a few days ago with some guys around the office. Tried this way, this one, which I did not like, and that one. So I decided to make a comic using this particular filter, which I'll take you to now. Okay, so this is Comic Life. Okay, and these are the pictures we have right here. All you need to do is after you have these pictures, you can just take them and drop them in. Boom. Now you can move them around if you want, but I think this frames it perfectly for this particular panel. Then you take the next one, pop it in, and let's say I want to take this one and put this in here. I actually want to, I can't fit both of them in this panel. I can change the size of these panels if I want to by dragging things at different sizes. But here, I want to zoom in on this guy's angry expression. That's kind of good there. And then to add the balloons, you can just drag these things up here and say, hang on a bit. Put it up here, put this tail down here, or add captions. like Dan was a good worker. Okay? And look how quickly I'm making this. It's so easy. So here's one I made earlier. And the reason this came about actually was because, so before I show you this, these guys they're doing a documentary with us, and they were saying that they hate meetings or people always playing with their phone or answering them. And I needed some demonstration for today, so I thought we'd make this. So, Dan was a good worker, except in meetings. Hang on, what, again? He was always on his phone. What, now he's texting? Didn't realize how much he upset people, but he soon found out. Okay. No phones in meetings unless you want to look like Dan. Right? That was just something we threw together quickly, right? But you can see, I can just tell right now by the smiles on your faces, if you put up a poster saying no phones in meetings, how effective is that? How engaging is that with people, as opposed to something like this? And it's all about the result you want. Now, maybe phones in the meetings aren't a big problem for you, but actually it is for a lot of companies. But if there's an important message you want to get across, is it worth spending, and this whole thing took me about 15 minutes, most of the processing power for Prisma. 15 minutes took the whole thing. If you want to get an important message across, is it worth spending 15 minutes doing something that will engage with people and that they will remember? I think it is. So, just going back to presentation. And it's not just for studying, for memory, or for work. This is something we did with a charity called Check 1-2, because it was in conjunction with Stephen Fry and Anton Deck. It's about testicular cancer. Breast cancer has had massive reductions in this country due to proper screening and awareness, but testicular cancer has stayed pretty much the level. Men don't check themselves. So we made a comic which was actually aimed at women to show men in their lives. Made it funny, him having a little feel there, testing stuff. And this was just to get people to check themselves. I think it's a worthwhile message, and apparently it was effective. They used it in their campaign. So going back to why people stop reading comics at the end, this is just a parting message on this. People do stop reading comics, mostly because they don't evolve the content they're taking, but there is so much content out there which will suit almost anyone's taste. I genuinely believe that. And you can read it for many reasons. You can read it just because you like stories, or because you like fantasy stories, or you like superhero stories, whatever you like. But let's say you like historical comics. A lot of people ask me if I could recommend one comic for them, what should I recommend? And my honest answer is, well, if you're reading it just for fun and enjoyment of reading, what content do you enjoy film-wise or book-wise? So if someone says they like history, well, I recommend Mouse. This is, anyone read this? Okay, 2 people, 3 people, good. So this is a fantastic comic. This is the first comic to win a Pulitzer Prize. And this is set in the 80s and the run-up to the Second World War. And about this guy who doesn't really get on with his father. He's a horrible man, but he has incredible respect for him because he survived Auschwitz. And it makes you laugh and it makes you cry, and it educates you so much about what actually happened. It's fascinating. Or let's say you want to learn something. I studied engineering at university, and my roommate studied physics, and he had this book called Introducing Einstein, which, because I read that, I know the theory of relativity, and I can explain it to anyone, which I think is fantastic. I doubt I would have gone and picked up a textbook to read about the theory of relativity, but because it was a comic book format and funny and well told, I definitely did. On the back of this, though, as a warning, I read Introducing Chaos Theory, and that was terribly written. I don't understand any of that. So someone could explain that to me later. That'd be great. What about travel? If someone likes travel, this is a guy who spent time in North Korea, and just how bizarre the lifestyle is there. There's like every public room has photographs with frames at an angle, so it's looking down at you off the family. Or you can learn about the economy, or the Arab-Israeli conflict. Or even if you want not reading it for fun, but for social interactions. I have a Japanese friend, and this is amazing to me. I didn't even know this. She read a bunch of manga when she moved to the UK on Shakespeare and classic English literature like Pride and Prejudice, so that in dinner parties or in casual conversation, she could have a meaningful discussion about these things without having to spend the time of reading all these classics. Now, if they're great classics, you might want to read them yourselves for the enjoyment of it, but if you're doing it for a different objective, whatever your end result is, that's a great way of doing it. Again, because it's quick to read, and you'll remember it for conversations. So, I think this is my final slide. Are there any bad examples of companies using comics? Yes. And I think the biggest culprit worldwide has to be IKEA. This is awful. I mean, even the structure of it, like books are the shape they are for a reason over thousands of years. That's what the science behind that as well, why humans like that shape. Like, you have to go all the way across here before you find the first panel. If someone reads a comic and people say, oh, I don't know which panels to read next, that means the creators have failed you, because it should be easy to the way the flow is done. They've had to put numbers in this. And it goes, the journey someone would read through this is like there to there to there, then goes all the way over there, then down, up. It's not up there. It's terrible. Sorry.
Isn't that saying pay someone to do it for you?
Well, my feedback on this is actually, has anyone actually ever made something from IKEA and made a mistake? You've never made a mistake. Not once.
I planned it out.
Classic Google employee here. Well done, sir. Well done. Okay, that's great. I have a master's in engineering, and I've made mistakes. Okay, I think these are terrible instructions, if I'm honest. And I don't think anyone's made a mistake as bad as this woman who's on the floor in shame after what she did. I mean, that was truly unforgivable. But if they gave this to people who knew what they're doing, comic book people, they could make this so much more engaging, and people wouldn't make as many mistakes. And yes, IKEA do print this on very thin, cheap paper, and they do it as few panels as possible. But I think adding an extra 2 or 3 pages to this would make the experience so much better for customers. They wouldn't have the dread of having to assemble it or having to pay other people about it. And they'd also maybe even have a competition on Twitter about it, like how was your experience? How many mistakes did you make? Turn it into a positive thing. That's if I was in IKEA, I'd definitely be getting proper people to do this. And I actually think in IKEA job interviews, they might want to do this. Yeah. And have their manual versus a comic manual, someone who knows what they're doing. So, in this talk, I've explained to you about the public perception of comics, the advantages of the medium, how it can be useful for you, how to make your own comics. And I would really love, if any of you have any questions after this, to get in contact with me, because I want you guys to use comics in some way. It could be helping your children revise. It could be helping change the culture of a different company. It could be a significant problem that people are having that you want to change, or a marketing idea. Whatever it is, I'd love to help, because I genuinely care about the medium. And I think, actually I know, that if you do use comics correctly, they really can help you in your studies or your career. I hope you found that interesting. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. We do have time for questions.
I just saw you have described how anybody can draw using the images. Is that how you have made this book? I mean, because do you do photo shootouts with actors or something like that? Because how do you make a big story out of it?
I personally don't. That was just a quick way of doing it, because when people buy comics, they buy it for one of 4 reasons. And everyone has their own preferences, but generally speaking, the majority buy it for actually the stories, then for the art, then for the coloring, and some people buy it just for the lettering, if you can believe it. So a large market is because of the artwork. So all the artwork we do, we constantly gets better and better. And so doing it using photos is a cheat for some people, because they want to actually see art. So that's why we don't.
But you actually draw.
Me? No, that requires talent, so no, I don't. No, I have a team of artists I work with.
Oh, I see.
Hi. So one medium which lots of people have got onto now with all the forums and Reddits and everything is memes. So that's kind of an accessible comic creation.
Yes.
So what's your thoughts on those?
Comics are actually sequential artwork, so it has to be time-based. Memes tend to be just one picture, so that to me is a cartoon rather than a comic. That's getting a bit, analytical about it, academic about it. But I think memes are great. Some of them are hilarious. Some of them are stupid. Some of them I don't understand, frankly. But they can be very effective, and the reason they are so popular now is because people share them, because it speaks to them. They get a reaction. So the good ones are great. The bad ones, well, not shared for a reason. Is that fair enough answer? Oh, by the way, the best question gets a copy of my brand new book. This won't be available in stores till I think next year. So the best question gets this. That's incentive for you.
That's a lot of pressure. Yeah, I wanted to ask if you have used comic for your personal use, not for careers or drawing comic for other companies. Have you created your own comic for your personal use, like to educate your kids or whatever?
I did, and it backfired on me. So I made this. This is called World of Chub Chub. And this is true stories of me as a kid. And these are stories my mum used to like telling everyone, right, of what I did, of what a bad kid I was and how funny it was. It's funny now, it wasn't funny at the time. So I made this comic as a gift to her for her birthday. And she found it so funny, she shared it with her friends, which was not my intention. And then they all said, Neil, you had to publish this. It's like, no, this is private. But no, she made me do it. So now everyone knows what a bad kid I was. So I did it for my own personal reasons, yes, but I did it for educational purpose. So for educational purposes, I did as well for one guy. Because he had difficulty understanding the difference between affect and effect, right? And he was a writer. So I drew an image of special effects, and the special effects blew out in a big E shape, okay? And there was someone else who went, it was hit by it, and he was shouting, and his body shape was like an A. The the special effects affect him. So that way he's not going to forget it.
That was effective.
It was effective, not affective, yes. Question? Anyone else?
Question? Or
Sorry, I thought, no, sorry.
questions? Yep.
What comics do you personally enjoy reading for fun?
I read a lot of comics. I have a massive library at home. Unfortunately, the comic book world isn't that big. So I've read all the great stuff, I think. My current favorite right now is Saga, which is the biggest selling comic in the world right now. It used to be Walking Dead, but it's overtaken them. But other than that, I'm struggling to find good stuff. And it's more independent creators who aren't that professional, but I meet them at Comic-Cons and I buy their stuff. But if you have any recommendations afterwards, I would love to hear them because I'm always looking for good content.
Have you had any issues with expressing something that is somewhat like an abstract concept in a way through comics? Like, for example, there was the comic about Einstein's. Wouldn't that take some of the value away that a wall of text would have in expressing abstract concepts more easily?
That's a very good point. I've never personally had to make very abstract concepts because most of the stuff I write or publish is fiction, or it's very clear the message you want to get across. When it's something very complicated, like I've always thought advanced mathematics and theoretical physicists are the smartest people on the planet because the way the brains work, these concepts, I get that. Oh wait, no, I don't get it anymore. It's very difficult to wrap your head around. I have not had to do it myself, so I don't know is the answer for that. But I still think, just from when I was studying engineering, they bring in models for you to look at. And rather than just reading text, showing images always is more effective. I still remember those models from years later.
Yeah, but I guess the problem is how to show them so that you express more abstract concepts in a way that is visually memorable.
I think you're going to have to give me an example of something.
If you teach programming to someone, for instance.
Programming?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't see a way of expressing that through comics apart without having a wall of text in one of the comics.
Well, okay.
Or just having text with examples.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, fine. Yes, fine. Well, for programming, you'd have to have the text because that's what you're actually doing. But I'll tell you what, if you actually want to discuss this, I can talk to you afterwards and we can go through a practical example. I'll see if I can actually help you on that because I'd love to see if I could.
Have you seen Scratch?
Nope.
Scratch is a kind of a graphical programming environment.
Ah,
Yeah, but that's different. I was just thinking if we could express textbook sort of subjects into comics and what the and whether this would be a limitation of comics.
I don't know. I'll talk to you after about it. But what I will say is I remember when I was young, science textbooks, they were very text heavy and didn't have many pictures compared to by the time I got to just before I started university. They were so much more glossy with color and had a lot, maybe 5 times as many diagrams as the ones that were around when I was a kid because they're effective. So I do think there probably is a way, but I have to go into the specifics of how to actually help you on this. I have to discuss afterwards. So no one thought, okay. Good, okay.
This is more of a follow-up to that. So there are some comic book textbooks that exist. So for example, the Manga Guide to Databases, there is a lot of text in it, but giving it reasons to exist. Like, why do you care about normalization? Well, you care about it because otherwise you might be giving apples to the fairy kingdom and you shouldn't be doing that. Like, so that can be helpful. And also you can better express, so there's a book, it's not a comic book, it's a regular book called If I Only Change the Software, Why Is the Phone on Fire? Which is useful for teaching process-related bits of coding, for example, that are quite difficult to describe in a traditional textbook format. So like thought process is how stuff happens, and this is done with a cast of characters as a kind of mystery novel type thing. So
Cool.
Yeah.
What do you think of digital comics or comics in a digital form?
Okay, so that's a good question. I think you're the contender for this one right now. I personally get enough, like you guys, probably get enough screen time. So I personally prefer reading. I like touching the books and reading it and flicking through. I like having a library where I can see everything I've read. So I personally prefer print massively to digital ones. However, I'm old. Okay, young people like reading digital comics, and that is the future, because with digital comics you can reach a mass market. You can get anyone in the world instant access to your material, and you can share it so much easier. The thing with digital comics though as well is what's interesting to me is that right now people will go into Waterstones or Barnes & Noble, look at the books they want to buy, and then on their phone buy it on Kindle as they're walking out the shop. Digital sales of books exceeds print sales of books, and they cannibalize it. That doesn't happen in comics. In comics, digital sales increase print sales because people want to have the physical copy as well. So I think that's great. I don't think comics are going to go anywhere. The consumption does change. It used to be all floppies, but now it's all moved to trade paperbacks. This is the big growth area because people like having a proper book. But digital comics have their place. A lot of people love them. I personally like a book.
So just as a follow-on to that, I almost exclusively read digital comics. The reason being, if I have a comic book in my hand, I will want to read the entire thing. And comic books these days are too long to read the entire thing, and it feels really jarring. I do the same with actual novels as well, but episodic digital comics are beneficial because there's only one new page every week. So you're limited in how much you can binge read.
I like binge reading. I like binge watching on Netflix.
But I can't.
That's a fair enough point. And look, it's how you want to consume it. That's all your choice. I personally do think that when you binge read, you get more of the creator's vision for it because the story continues. You don't forget things as much. It's like I'm quite looking forward to Game of Thrones when it comes out later this year, but I'm probably going to go back and try and find an online catch-up in an hour where I can go through everything that's happened in the past. So if you're reading it in one go, you don't need to do that. You can read it once. But yeah, it's individual taste.
So I guess a different form of digital comics. Do you have any experience with, particularly for, I guess, the industrial applications, interactive comics?
Yes, I have experienced them. I don't like them. Now, I think it's the reason it hasn't taken off. It could be that there hasn't been good enough content, but the one I think if it's like a web comic where it's just one button, so you have the image and then you click the button and something extra happens, they're just there. That is interactive and that has its place, but it hasn't taken off in the mainstream because it's not really a comic. It's a sort of hybrid, and maybe there's some great stuff out there, but I've yet to see one where I go, wow, I really enjoyed this. Where there are dozens of comics which I recommend to people and say, look, this is fantastic. I know you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
It's my nemesis here.
So just a thought on industry comics. They're really good for getting across a concept, getting people to read the new concept and getting information out.
Yes.
But they're really bad for reference. So you always need the text counterpart to be able to look things up, because you can't look things up inside a visual novel.
What do you mean look things up?
So something has happened, you need to instantly reference what to do to fix that situation. Basically an index. How do you index into a visual novel where the information could be anywhere on a page, anywhere in a book?
Can you give me an example?
For instance, say one of the databases is blown up and there's an error. How do I find this in my graphical novel information about how to fix errors?
Right, well to me then that's a process flow.
Yeah.
So you see the flow chart, you don't need a graphic novel for that.
Yeah.
Graphic novels are for telling a story. But you knew that when you asked the question.
I'm just
you
saying,
are my nemesis. I was going to give you this comic, but not anymore.
I think we can close here, so please join me in thanking Neil Gibson.
Thank you.